Welcome from the University of St Andrews, alumni, colleagues and friends across the globe. I'm Gavin Rennie, Alumni Relations Manager, and I'm delighted to be your host for this next instalment of our Saints Talk series. Today we'll be joined by Dr Maggie Ellis MBE, a Senior Lecturer in the School of Psychology and Neuroscience at the University of St Andrews. Her research focuses on the facilitation of communication at all stages of dementia and how this is impacted by our attitudes towards those living with the condition. Dr Ellis was recently awarded an MBE for her services to people living with dementia, their family members and professional caregivers. In this talk, Dr Ellis will discuss her recent work on adaptive interaction, a communication technique designed to help us recognise and use the retained communication skills of people living with advanced dementia. Following the talk, attendees can ask Dr Ellis questions in a live Q&A session. Please pop your questions into the chat during the talk and we'll get through as many as we can. Over to you, Maggie.
Hello, good evening everyone. Thanks very much for coming along tonight. We got it working this time, so it's all good. I'm here for the next hour or so please do ask me any questions. If you have any, just put them in the chat. I'm going to talk to you tonight about the gift of curiosity, about remaining curious to individuals with advanced dementia and why that is so important. I'm going to start somewhere that you might not expect. And I'm going to start right at the beginning of life to talk to you about the fundamentals of communication. Now, in this video, the person you see on the left is my great niece, Eve. And the person you see on the right in the purple dressing gown and slippers is my niece, Sam. So this is Eve and Sam having an interaction, and Eve is about 5 months old there. So this is a really good demonstration of how young infants learn to communicate. It shows turn taking, it shows mimicking of sounds. Let's just have a look at this and see what you think, okay? I think it will look familiar to even those of you who don't have children. It's almost as though it just comes so naturally to us that it's easy to understand.
Oh, oh, oh,
So you might think it's a bit strange that I'm talking about people with advanced dementia tonight, but I'm starting by showing you a video of a young baby. The reason I'm showing you this video of the young baby is these fundamental skills of communication, we're born with them. They develop over time. They develop into speech. And without them, we never learn to communicate effectively. And we don't lose them. And that is a point to remember for this talk. So if we think, is this communication between Sam and Eve? Because I can't talk to you directly, which is a shame. I would say, yes, this is communication. If we were to say in what way, are they exchanging information? Are they exchanging ideas? Are they exchanging feelings? And in what way are they communicating? And we can put it down to something as simple as, I see you and you see me. Yeah, we are paying attention to each other. We are attuned to each other. And I know that you're interacting with me. Okay, so that's a really important point to remember for this talk. So is this type of exchange important? So as I've already said, it's hugely important. because if we meet the person where they are in terms of how they communicate, gives them a much better chance of being able to communicate with us. And the example I always give is you would never say to a baby, "What do you fancy for your tea tonight?" You just wouldn't, because you would know that the baby wouldn't understand, wouldn't be able to answer. And how you communicate with the baby is how you saw Sam and Eve interacting together. This is how it all begins. And this is how we learn to talk. This is how it all starts. So they're communicating some sort of content. It's I see you, you see me. Maybe some emotion in there. There's happiness. There looks like a bit of surprise. So we don't need speech to be able to communicate those things. We don't need speech to be able to communicate attunement, I see you, you see me, or emotional content. And these skills, the development of these skills, are absolutely vital to be developed whilst we're young babies. If they're not developed correctly, then we never form successful relationships, and we never really learn to communicate in the world around us. So what has been found in the developmental literature is that curiosity and collaboration are key to this relationship and to the development of communication. And parental curiosity has been identified as being absolutely key to this communication development in infants. And it involves parents being actively curious about what the baby is thinking and feeling. And it also involves the parents responding to those signals. Yeah. So if Eve was to make that sound and Sam was not to respond, Eve would be left wondering, well, why is she not responding to me? You know, it's very natural for her to have this backwards and forwards. So now that I've explained that and why we're speaking a little bit about infants at the start, I want to now introduce you to communication in advanced dementia, and hopefully this will make a bit more sense to you now. Tom Kitwood, and this is in 1997, so it's a long time ago now, famously said, in the course of dementia, a person will try to use whatever communication resources he or she still has available. If some of those more sophisticated means of action have dwindled away, for example, speech, it may be necessary to fall back on ways that are more basic and more deeply learned. Some of those were learned in early childhood. So that kind of draws it all together, that maybe people with advanced dementia are relying on those more basic skills because they are losing their higher skills, so the ability to speak, to understand speech. So they're relying on those more basic skills and those fundamentals of communication. So there is already out there an intervention that was developed in the 1980s using this sort of communication with people with multiple and profound learning disabilities, people with great communication difficulties. So we're talking about deaf-blind individuals as well, people with severe autism. And intensive interaction involved a way for us to kind of enter their world, if you like, for us to learn their language instead of trying to bring them into ours. And intensive interaction involves behaviour matching. So just like you saw with Eve and Sam, there was turn taking, there was matching of sounds and facial expressions. It involves very little or no speech, because sometimes the individuals who participate in this have maybe one or two words, or sometimes no speech at all. And it focuses on the fundamentals of communication that I've been talking about. So it focuses on those that we all have. And it's important to realise for intensive interaction that each individual person has a different communicative repertoire. So we will all use facial expressions and sounds and bodily movements to communicate. I mean, we do too. We just don't notice it so much because we use speech, but we all use them in different ways. So some of us are a bit more outgoing, like me, so I will use my hands a lot when I talk. Some people don't. So some people will use other ways to communicate to get their point across. It's used to connect and to teach with people, to teach people with profound and multiple learning disabilities. So the approach is used to first form a connection and then maybe involve some sort of a curriculum. Very, very simple elements in a curriculum for learning disabilities. And what is fantastic about this approach is that the relationship between the person with learning disabilities and the person communicating with them can be built up over time. So if I were to go in one day and see Lynn, who you're going to see in the next video, she is likely to remember me the following day, and we can maybe pick up where we left off. So the relationship is built up and you get to know each other and you get to form this relationship, and the communication will change over time as you get to know each other a bit better. So I'd like to show you intensive interaction in action. The next video is of Lynn, and Lynn is a young woman with profound and multiple learning disabilities, and she is sitting with a carer who is being trained in real time by a lady standing behind the camera who has an exceptionally posh accent. That's Phoebe Caldwell. So Phoebe Caldwell is huge in this field. I think she's possibly 90 now, and I'm sure she still teaches people how to do this. So she's unstoppable. And she taught myself and my collaborator how to engage in this work as well. She's just fantastic. So you'll hear her talking in the background. But I want you to look at the interaction and see if you can identify the point at which Lynn suddenly wakes up and pays attention. Okay?
Ah. Put her name in as well to keep her.
Lily. Oh. Lily.
So you're mixing up her sounds with her name, which is good. And you have got her attention.
Yeah.
Very, very, which for her maybe almost as much as you can get, although we know that she can laugh because I saw her. But just keeping her attention is quite a lot.
I'd say a lot of the time she refuses to give eye
That's
contact.
right.
If you're doing a physical activity,
Yeah.
if you do like art or something like that, and you try to get her eye contact, she doesn't look. Yet talking to her, she's very, very good.
Yeah.
Lily.
Now answer that. Ah, very definitely. Ah. She needs to know that when she makes a sound, someone will answer.
Yeah. Lily. Hey.
That's right. Don't go easy on the arm because actually you're trying to get her to focus on the verbal to and fro. voice. So she's not good. Might try then.
Okay, so it's a shame I can't talk to you about this. But if you want to put any comments in the chat about the video, please do. But what I see in that video is the point at which Lynn starts to pay attention is when the carer starts to use her sound to communicate with her. So before that happens, she's saying Lenny, Lenny, and it's this sort of sing-song voice, and Lynn's not particularly interested in that. But when she uses her sound to communicate with her, then suddenly there's a backwards and forwards. There's very much turn taking. It looks like a conversation. Lynn smiles. She completely changes. And Phoebe in the background says she needs to know that when she makes a sound, someone will answer. And that's exactly what happens here, is that the carer has answered her using her sound. And that's the thing that makes the difference to Lynn. Is that she feels that she's being heard because she hears her sound in someone else. She hears someone else talking her language. So that leads us to the beginnings of my work. So it's 21 years ago now. I was invited to a conference in Dundee and then one in Bergen on intensive interaction. And I became really interested in this approach because I saw lots of people in care homes doing the work that I did who were not being communicated with at all because they appeared to be completely uncommunicative. Okay, so there was nothing going on for them. There was no sort of effort being made to engage them because people didn't know it was possible. So I went to this conference, saw lots of videos like that one you just saw there, so lots more, and I was just fascinated by this approach and thought, I wonder if this might benefit people with advanced dementia who may be in a similar situation to these individuals, almost locked in to their own world. And this whole project over the last 21 years, I can't believe I'm saying that out loud, was developed with at that time she was my boss and PhD supervisor, and she's now my closest collaborator. She just can't seem to shake me at all. That's Professor Arlene Estelle from the University of Northumbria, and we still work together. We still do this work together today. So I really, really wanted to try using this with a person with advanced dementia. So could we use this? What would it look like? Could we use the principles of this approach for people with dementia? And the points for would be, well, yes, because it focuses on the communicative actions that the person already uses themselves. So they're not expected to jump back into our world and to use speech because that's not going to happen. And because of that, it includes very little or no speech. Sometimes people retain 1 or 2 words. If they do, that's absolutely fine. You can use that. And again, these fundamentals are capacities that we're born with, we use throughout our lives, and we never lose them. So we're using capacities that the person has. Yeah. And I'm aware that there are points against, that you may have some questions about using this approach for people with advanced dementia. And I'm willing to answer a couple of questions just now, if anyone has any. If not, we can do it at the end. I'll just wait a couple of seconds and see if anyone puts anything in the chat. No? Okay, let's move on. There'll be time at the end and we can talk about it. So, if we're going to use this with people with dementia, we have to stay curious. And that is something that is not afforded to people with advanced dementia very often. We kind of accept that they are non-communicative at a certain stage, maybe at the end of their lives, and we're no longer curious as to what anything means anymore. So we're very, very curious about Eve, the baby, right? What is she trying to do there? What is she trying to communicate there? If a person with dementia was to make a sound like that, we would just assume it's because she has dementia. Yeah. So if we're going to use this for people with dementia, we had to view acts of self-stimulation, such as maybe making a sound, or maybe pulling at their clothing, pulling at items of clothing, and maybe tapping. Any acts of self-stimulation or any movement, sound, anything like that, we have to view those as bids to communicate with us. Yeah, so we have to stay curious to those and we have to respond to them accordingly, which means not talking, which feels awkward to people. It can feel a bit strange, and it can feel like it's something that you should not be doing with an older person. But over the years, we have managed to, I think, make the argument quite well that because we are using the person's retained skills, then we are paying them the utmost respect by responding to them using their language rather than ours. Okay, so I did eventually get the chance to work with someone with advanced dementia. It took a long time to get permission to do so because if a person can't give informed consent, you have to go through an NHS ethics procedure, which takes a long time. It's very complicated, and rightly so. A proxy has to give consent for the person to work with us. So I was introduced to Edie by Edie's daughter, who gave us consent to work with her. And when I met her, she was 81 years old, and she'd been resident in a care home for 5 years at this point. She was at a stage of dementia where she had lost the ability to speak, and as far as we could tell, understand the speech of others. She was also unable to walk or feed herself. So she was in bed a lot of the time. And when she wasn't in bed, and she was maybe put in a wheelchair and taken through to the day room, she made this really loud sound that the other residents found quite disturbing. And because of this, she was taken back to her room very often, and she became very socially isolated. And really the only sort of interactions that she had was when carers would come into her room to help her to eat, to help her to shower, to help her to use the loo, or when her daughter came in to visit, which thankfully was very regularly. So I spent a couple of days in the care home looking at Edie's opportunities for social interaction. So how many opportunities did she have to interact with someone throughout the day? And what I saw was either her daughter was there, and that was absolutely fine, or, as I said, carers would come into her room, maybe open the curtains and say, "Good morning, hope you're well today. Here's your lunch, have you, do you hear that music in the next room?" Just questions like that they knew she would never answer, but talking to her, making an effort to talk to her. So what we did was we decided to come up with a set of questions that we would ask Edie, because to take intensive interaction and try that with her without comparing it to something else, it wouldn't be very scientific. So we had to design something that we could compare it to. And this is what we call the standard interaction, which is what she was used to. So we designed this set of questions, and they were closed questions, which means that she could give a yes or a no answer. So she didn't have to be able to talk if she understood them. She could nod or shake her head. We also left a large gap between the questions because we know that people with advanced dementia have a very, very long processing time. So it would have taken her a long time to process the information she was able to understand. So this looks like a very strange interaction. So I'm there with her 21 years ago. I still had hair then. And she looks bored and just disinterested. And this video is actually 10 minutes long. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, don't worry. But eventually she just rolls over and goes to sleep. So I'm going to show you this video and show you how ineffective this approach actually is. So that's her sound. Have you seen the weather outside today? It's lovely, isn't it? So I hope we can agree that that's not an effective way to communicate with ED. She starts off, she's interested because she makes her sound and she's interested that there's someone there, and she does look at me, and she starts to chew her thumb, and she keeps looking at me, and I'm not giving her back anything that she understands or that is meaningful to her. And she eventually just closes her eyes, as you see there. She just thinks, well, what's the point? It's almost like she's just completely cut herself off from me. So that's the standard interaction. Okay, the next one I'm going to show you is me for the very first time trying to use the principles of intensive interaction. And you will see the title of this video says adaptive interaction, and I'll tell you why we changed the name as we go on. So this video is loud. Okay, so she's making her sound, I'm making it back. There's lots and lots going on in this video. And people feel different ways about it. So maybe we can talk at the end about how it made you feel. But this is me trying to use the principles of intensive interaction the very first time. So you'll see that's a very, very different interaction. She was very, very vocal. she spent ages trying to train me what to do before I realised that what she wanted me to do was head rubs. She kept lifting herself up, which must have been a huge effort for someone that lies in bed all day, lifting herself up towards me. And then it was when, I did the head rub with her that her eyes fly open in surprise and she started to laugh. So it was a really emotional, 10 minutes for both of us, I think. So this is the very start of this work. Once I'd done that, I thought, oh yeah, we have to pursue this. And we did the initial research findings were published in a case study, and we did a micro-analysis of both videos, and we looked at, so this is like second by second, what is happening second by second. And what we found was that we saw increased vocalization, movements, facial expressions, eye gaze, turn taking, initiation of interaction, laughing and smiling. In the adaptive interaction video, or using the principles of intensive interaction video, and none of that in the other one. And from that, we thought, well, there's something in this. There's something in this approach. So it's revealed her communication repertoire somehow. So me using her language has allowed her to bring out even more of her language. So from then on, my whole PhD changed direction, which I had to apologise to my supervisor for, because I was just like, I was so excited. It's like, we've got to keep doing this, we've got to keep doing it. So my PhD changed, my whole research career changed. This moment changed everything. So further research findings that Arlene and I have gained over the years is that we found that this approach definitely has potential. We see increased engagement, like smiling, vocalizing, imitation, and those are those communication fundamentals that I've been banging on about since the start of this talk. We identified it as a way for us to learn the language of the person with advanced dementia, which is exactly how it works with people with learning disabilities. But it is slightly different with the population that we work with, because people with advanced dementia have extreme memory problems. So if I had walked out of the room and come back in again, it's unlikely that she would remember me. So we couldn't kind of pick up where we left off the last time. So what we had to do was work in the moment and give her back whatever she gave me. So I couldn't reintroduce something that we'd done in a previous session, and we had to adapt to what she did each time. And because of that, we named our variation of the approach adaptive interaction. So that's where it comes from. More recent work, this is just the start of the work. There's lots more been done since then. In the last 21 years, we've got lots of peer-reviewed journal articles. Practice journal articles are really important, because then the people who need to use this approach can access it. We presented at conferences, written book chapters. We have a professional caregiver training programme. We've got books. We deliver free family member training programmes with Age UK. I'm currently developing a digital education programme with the university, which means I'm getting to go out and do filming at the moment, which I love. So I'm getting to go out and do this kind of stuff, which is great fun. And I've also done some recent work on an exploration of attitudes towards people living with dementia and the impact it has on our care. And our attitudes towards people at all stages has a huge impact on how we approach them. And if you think about this work in terms of people with advanced dementia, if we think that there's no way that they can communicate and there's no point in even trying, you can imagine the impact that has on their lives. They're lonely, they're isolated. So I'll tell you a little bit about that work, because I'm aware that I've already gone over time. The work that we did was an exploration of the impact of attitudes. We took two main models of dementia, of understanding dementia. So first of all, on the left there's the biomedical model, which focuses on medical factors. So it focuses on prevention, medical factors, and cures. We're looking for a cure. And the way people are discussed is all about loss and disease-oriented representations. It's all about person can no longer do this, can no longer do that. And this contributes to dementia-related stigma hugely. This reference here, Swaffer. Kate Swaffer is actually a person with dementia who advocates, and she says that this language contributes hugely to how we treat people with dementia. On the other hand, the psychosocial model of dementia, the research focuses on the psychological and social relationships and needs of the person. And instead of focusing on what the person can no longer do, it focuses on what the person can still do. So Edie can still make sounds, she can still movement, she can still connect with another person. So we're looking at what she can still do, and we're looking at how we can kind of use that to validate her personhood and make her feel seen. And it considers the impact of dementia, stigma, the psychosocial model. Okay, so what we did in this study, I'll just discuss this very briefly. We did this online with people all over the world, and anyone could sign up to it. And we presented half of the participants with a biomedical vignette, which is a little story, and the other half with a psychosocial vignette. And it was about the same person. It was about John and John's wife and how they deal with their situation. So John has dementia, his wife is his carer. In the biomedical vignette, the emphasis was on decline in dependency and loss, and used phrases such as John suffers from Alzheimer's, describes him as being entirely dependent on his wife. And the tone was of helplessness, that he was helpless, that he wasn't able to do anything for himself. And because of his communication difficulties, he was becoming isolated. In the psychosocial vignette, which is talking about the same person, we're just using different language. The emphasis was on how the person adapts to the situation, how they connect with other people, and how they demonstrate agency in the world. So instead of John suffers from Alzheimer's, it's John lives with Alzheimer's. In the biomedical, it describes John as entirely dependent, and the psychosocial vignette describes John and Sheila as partners in care, and they are navigating this change together. In the biomedical vignette, we're talking about this helplessness and isolation, and the psychosocial vignette, we're talking about resilience and relational growth and how their relationship grows over time and changes, but they're still together and they still support each other. So there were other measures included in this study that I won't go into, but that's the main points I want you to think about just now. The key findings were that the people who read the psychosocial framing produced significantly reduced stigma scores on a scale about stigma and dementia. So they had significantly less stigma attached to dementia, which was just wonderful for us. I mean, we made we hypothesized that would happen, but when it actually does happen, it's like, wow, this is fantastic. So it suggests, therefore, that the language we use can shape the attitudes that we have, even with a brief exposure, something like reading a vignette. And the implications for this work showed that there's a potential here for some low-cost and scalable stigma reduction work around dementia that would involve considering our language. Interventions, training caregivers to use different language around people with dementia, and that this could be embedded into their training and into campaigns as well. into the campaigns we see on TV, posters, and in care settings worldwide. The wider implications of this, of both of these pieces of work, so the stigma, attitudes work, and the adaptive interaction work, which slot together very nicely, is that they both challenge current dementia representations of loss and inability. It also affects caregiver-specific focus on stigma, research and support. And it encourages us to consider our use of language in the wider society when we're talking about people with dementia and the condition. Future directions for us are to conduct a longitudinal study. So we'd like to look at how this is affected over time. If we do a follow-up study in 6 months, will those people who had the psychosocial vignettes still have more positive attitudes, or will that change back again? We'd like to also look at population-specific studies, because as I said, this was people from all around the world, and we'd like to look at people from different countries and see if there are sort of cultural differences in stigma and how this is affected by these vignettes. We would amend the questionnaire slightly as well, just to fit that specific culture. We'd also like to look at caregiver burden analysis and a qualitative analysis of free text that people might write down in response to what they have just read. So, for example, what did you think of the description of John? Well, he seems blah, blah, blah. So that would involve a long drawn out qualitative analysis. So that's our next steps. For me, my immediate next step is making the digital education programme for the university, which will be available for anyone to access and relatively affordable as well, because the training that we currently offer is very expensive because it involves myself and Professor Estelle going to your place of work, staying there for 3 days and helping you through this process of using adaptive interaction. And helping you to find ways of monitoring it and of sustaining it. But this course will be a 6-week course. Anyone can take it. And it will be, it will be affordable. So people who work frontline caregivers will be able to afford to buy this course, which is fantastic. And I'm so happy about that, because I want people to be able to use this. I don't want it sat on a dusty bookshelf somewhere in a library, in a journal article that no one will see. I want people to use it. So, just to finish off, if you're staying curious, the people with advanced dementia, it's not just a gift to people living with advanced dementia, but it's also for those who wish to connect or to reconnect with them. So it is a gift both to us and to the person with dementia. And I'd like to thank you very much for listening to me this evening. I'm glad everything worked this time. That's brilliant. I think I've probably talked too long, so I apologise about that. Hopefully we've got some time for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Thank you. Just been going through this. There's a lot of questions to get through. I'm going to do my best to try and cover as many of them as possible. I just wanted to start off by saying when you were talking about the Phoebe Caldwell video, we had a lovely message, and I actually wanted to interrupt you, and I didn't. I had to hold myself back. But one of our attendees said I couldn't stop smiling at the change that came over Lynn during that video. It was lovely. So thank you to the user that sent that in.
Yes, thank you for that.
So loads of questions to get through, and actually, can I start off by this is more of a kind of conversation starter than a question, but two people have said something similar, so I just want to try and get through both of them, okay? So it seems as if the first one, it seems as if the curiosity of your approach comes from real love and valuing the person as an individual, even delighting in them just as someone might with a baby.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so nice. And then the second one, similarly, the term regressing to childhood has traditionally implied negativity, but your discoveries suggest that if harnessed with understanding, dignity, and respect of the individual, this state of humanity, whilst sad and regrettable, can actually be rewarding and fulfilling, much as it was at the start of life. I wondered if you wanted to kind of comment on that.
Both comments are just wonderful and make me so happy. So thank you very much. One of the criticisms that has been levelled at this work over the years, you're treating this person as though she were a child, but what we're actually doing is using her retained skills. And so I don't see it as reverting to childhood. I see it as, person with dementia has lived a whole life, probably had children, a job, they're not children. And I don't see them as regressing to children. I see it as they maybe are left with a similar set of communication skills that maybe a young infant has. And if we don't work with those and we try and use sort of higher skills, then we're not respecting them.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
both comments, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Maggie. Someone else has asked, when working with someone like Edie over a period of time, did you notice any signs of growing well-being or improvements in other areas of her life, as well as potential increased well-being of caregivers?
That's interesting, because at the time, this is like 2004, I did this, and the carers thought I was mad. Yeah, so they would walk past the door and be like, "What are you doing?" So things have changed a lot since then. But this case study was not longitudinal. So we did 10 sessions, but they were done over maybe 2 weeks. So I didn't get a chance to measure any sort of changes in her well-being or attitudes of the staff towards her. It was really just to see if this would do anything, if we could connect with her using this. And that's why longitudinal study is the next thing on my list, because it's really difficult to get funding for this work.
Yeah.
As well. And it takes, I can't do it all myself. So it takes funding to employ someone to be able to go out and do it, and collect the data. And I'm hoping to have a PhD student start with me next year who's going to take this further, and do something longitudinal.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. A couple more questions, if I can, if that's okay, if you're okay.
Yeah.
What about the healthcare professionals? So someone's asked, do you find health and care professionals are open to using this technique? So one user said when they worked in an acute setting years ago, and this may have changed over time, so I'm interested to know your kind of insight into that. The dementia specialist team spent a lot of time telling colleagues that screaming isn't a symptom of dementia, but more an attempt to communicate. But it wasn't always viewed that way. Have you kind of seen a shift in that and a kind of progression in that way? Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I see a difference in how people are trained, but I don't necessarily see that translate to care so much. I mean, attitudes are changing slowly, and the people may be screaming or harming themselves is now seen as an unmet need. They're expressing an unmet need. They're trying to express something, but the focus tends to be on, I wonder what it is she's trying to say. Right? Yeah. The answer to that is we can never know. If all her physical needs are met, she's warm, she's not hungry, she doesn't need to go to the loo. If all those needs are met, we can assume that what she wants is someone to talk to her. Using her language. And that's the important thing. So I have seen attitudes change. I've seen people much more interested in our work now than they used to be. They used to be very suspicious. people were sort of, I'm not sure you should be doing that. Doesn't look
Yeah.
very respectful.
Yeah.
But I think we've managed to explain it in a way that people understand. Anyway, I could talk about it all night.
No, absolutely. I think we saw that in the video with Phoebe and Lynn, and the delight that came across her face when that communication was opened.
Yeah.
It was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in the verbal and non-verbal aspect as well. And you've touched on that a lot this evening. But another question that's come in is, what about people with dementia who can intermittently or briefly articulate and then lapse into silence or be inaudible, seemingly confused? How do you approach that, and how do you what are kind of strategies to deal with that?
That's a great question. That is a great question, because we can still use this with individuals who still have some speech, and even though it may be disordered speech and that not something that we can understand. And I've used this with lots of people who still have a few words, and the key is to again use their language.
Yeah.
So if someone's retained word is, I knew someone whose retained word was ice cream.
Okay.
And that's what she said all the time.
Yeah.
But she would say it like she was having a conversation. So she would say, ice cream, and use facial expressions, and then she'd laugh, and it's like she was telling me a story. And if I found that if I use her language, use her words, but also reflect her facial expressions, like, oh, okay, yeah, then we were still having a dialogue. And it doesn't matter if the speech is incomprehensible. It's the exchange of connection and emotional content, I think. I had a fantastic interaction with a lady when I was doing the filming for the digital program, and she could speak a lot. I mean, she spoke a lot, but I couldn't understand what she meant at all. However, she was very expressive, like her face. And it was like she was telling me the story, and she was saying, and then, oh, and it was just like, I almost felt like I knew what she meant by her facial expressions, and she made me laugh. She was really funny. So it's possible. It's possible to reach people.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to go for one more question, because I really want to get these two in as well. I'm going to try and combine them, so bear with me. But so Stephen's written in that primary care approach to dementia depends heavily on secondary care diagnosis, but there can sometimes be little emphasis on the benefit to outcomes. What outcomes are ones that you would value the most? And then kind of additionally to that, do you think spiritual need is met by this approach as well? So I've not tried to answer it. I've more just tried to tag that on as a secondary output, if you like.
Okay, so the first one was, sorry, remind me.
That's okay. So the emphasis on the benefit to outcomes. So what outcomes
what
are
outcomes
ones you would value?
are we looking for? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So what we have found so far, which I think is the most important outcome. We'd love to see an increase in quality of life of people with dementia, increase in job satisfaction and caregivers, a decrease in staff turnover, an increase in staff self-efficacy, etc., etc. But what we have found, and I think is probably the most important finding, is that for the training, we ask staff to rate the person that they are working with. They're partnered with a person with advanced dementia, and we ask them to rate how well they think they communicate on several different levels. And at the end of the training, we do it again, and the scores always go up.
Wow.
So to me, that's like where the magic happens. So it's not the person is not communicating better at the end of we are. We are changing our minds about what is possible, and we are noticing things we didn't notice before. And I think that is a hugely important outcome for us, that we change people's minds about what's possible.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you, Maggie.
Okay. And did I miss another one?
And the second part, I guess, was more about
the spiritual
need.
That's a difficult one to answer. I actually don't have an answer for that one. I don't know. The spirituality is not something that we look into with this, but I can only imagine that it will have an effect on well-being if you're being listened to. And that might have some sort of a knock-on effect for spirituality. That's a good question, because I've never been asked that before. I've never thought about that before. Maybe that's something that we can look into in the future, because we know that people with dementia in earlier stages are still taken to church, still go to church on a Sunday, and maybe that's something that Edie would have wanted to do. But in all honesty, at this stage of dementia, getting through to her is the priority, really.
Of course, yeah.
But good question, yeah.
Great, thank you, Maggie. This isn't and I think this is a nice kind of end to this. Actually, this isn't a question. This is more just some help, some feedback from Ian, one of our listeners this evening, who says thank you. This has been really insightful, really beneficial at a personal level. It's provided me an understanding of why my mother is doing what she does to communicate and engage. So no questions, just appreciation. So
that's lovely. That's lovely. It's always great to hear, and you're very, very welcome. If you'd like me to come back again sometime and show you some more videos and show you where we're at, I have lots more information I could share if you're interested, and I'm always happy to talk about it.
And Maggie's email is in the Q&A if you want to reach out. We also have put a link to a feedback form as well in there if you'd like to tell us what you thought of this evening's event. Maggie, you've also published 3 books, I believe.
Yes.
And links to those are also in the Q&A if people would like to read those and find out more about them. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Maggie, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this, as I knew I would, to be honest. But that is all we have time for this evening. So I'd like to extend our thanks to you for your talk and answering all those questions. I did go slightly over. Apologies.
No, I did.
The event's been recorded, and we'll be hosting the recording on our YouTube channel if anyone wishes to watch it back.
Okay.
This is actually the last Saints Talk of 2025, but we will be back in the new year, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Thanks again, Maggie, for everything this evening,
My
and
pleasure.
to all of you at home for watching. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.